Hello everyone. Spending a little bit of time out here at the park and thought I'd do this video. A lot of people have been asking what the terms are for or definitions for serial killers, and I've seen a lot of questions about different categories and stuff that they fall in, and some people get like spree killers confused with serial killers and mass murderers and all of that. So basically this video is just to kind of clear up some of that. And basically serial killers are, what's the word for them? Intriguing. The finding the logic in the unlogical. Like what doesn't make sense to us and how it makes sense to them. I mean, it falls into a lot of different categories, honestly. But basically, they disgust us, they terrify us, and they fascinate us. They are veritable monsters in human form, representing some of the scariest and yet most interesting people on Earth. Serial killers are the ones whose gory deeds leave us asking why. Some were victimized themselves, some suffered from serious mental health issues, and some are just plain evil. Whatever the psychological makeup of the serial killers are, their stories are filled with shock elements that always leave us coming back for more, even if we are chilled to the bone. Ted Bundy, the handsome charmer. David Ray Parker, the toy box killer. Ed Gein, the man who inspired Norman Bates from Psycho and Leatherface from Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's not all middle-aged white men, though. We also have Eileen Wuornos, whose own film adaptation, Monster, tells you exactly what she was by the title alone. Serial killer is a noun. A person who commits a series of murders, often with no apparent motive, and typically following a characteristic, predictable pattern. A deeper definition is typically a person who murders 3 or more people, usually in service of abnormal psychological gratification, with the murders taking place over more than a month and including a significant period of time in between them. The English term and concept of serial killer are commonly attributed to former FBI Special Agent Robert Ressler, who used the term serial homicide in 1974 in a lecture at Police Staff Academy in Bramshill, Hampshire, England, in the United Kingdom. Author Anne Rule gives credit to LAPD Detective Pierce Brooks, who created the Violent Criminal Apprehension Program known as VICAP in 1985. The German term and concept were coined by criminologist Ernest Gannett, who described Peter Curtin as serial murderer, serial morder, in 1930. The term popularized in 1981 when the New York Times published an article using the term to describe Wayne Williams. Through the 1980s, the term was used again on 233 occasions, and by the end of the 1990s, it had been used 2,514 times in that newspaper alone. When defining serial killers, researchers generally use 3 or more murders as a baseline, independent of the number of murders. They have to have been committed at different times and usually at different locations. Serial killers have a cooling off period. Without a cooling off period, some experts have suggested the hybrid term of spree serial killer. The FBI defines serial killing as a series of 2 or more murders committed as separate events, usually, but not always, by one offender acting alone. Historic criminologists suggest that there has always been serial killers throughout history. Some sources suggest legends such as werewolves and vampires were inspired by medieval serial killers. In Africa, there have been periodic outbreaks of murders by the lion and leopard men. In the 9th century, year 257 of the Islamic calendar, a strangler from Baghdad was apprehended. He had murdered a number of women and buried them in the house he was living in. In the 15th century, one of the wealthiest men in Europe and former companion in arms of Joan of Arc, Gilles de Rais, was alleged to have sexually assaulted and killed peasant children, mainly boys, whom he abducted from the surrounding villages and had taken to his castle. An estimation of his victims numbered between 140 and 800. Elizabeth Bathory allegedly tortured and killed as many as 650 girls and young women before her arrest in 1610. Thug Bayram, a member of the Thuggee cult in India, may have murdered 931 people. Eusebius Paidagnel, okay, don't quote me on that name, 1870, confessed to having a sexual obsession with blood and killing 6 people. Jack the Ripper, even though unidentified to this day, has been called the first modern serial killer who killed at least 5 women in London 1888, and others are speculated. H. Holmes was one of the first documented modern serial killers in the USA, responsible for the death of at least 9 victims in early 1890s. During the same time, Joseph Rocker, the French Ripper, was executed in 1898 after confessing to mutilating 11 women and children. Some characteristics commonly found amongst serial killers include, but not limited to, of course, they may exhibit varying degrees of mental illness or psychopathy. Psychopathic behavior can include lack of remorse, lack of guilt, impulsivity, need to control, and predatory behavior, and can seem normal and charming. They were often abused, emotionally, physically, and or sexually, usually by a family member. They are likely to engage in fetishism, partialism, or necrophilia, which are paraphilias that invoke a strong tendency to experience the object of erotic interest. They usually exhibit 1, 2, or 3 of the McDonald triad of predictors of future violence: fire starting, sadistic behavior such as torturing animals, and over 60% wet the bed after age 12. Frequently bullied or socially isolated as children. Involvement in petty crimes such as fraud, theft, and vandalism. Trouble staying employed. Average to low IQs. Female serial killers are rare compared to their male counterparts, approximately 1 in 6 in the USA between 1800 and 2004. 64 females out of 416 known offenders. Classifications include Black Widow, Angel of Death, Sexual Predator, Revenge, Prophet or Crime, Team Killer, Question of Sanity, Unexplained and Unsolved. Black Widow and Team Killer tend to be the most observed. Motivations usually include seeking attention, addiction, psychopathic behavior factors, and are commonly categorized as murdering men for material gain, usually being emotionally close to their victims, generally needing to have a relationship with the victim. Preferred methods of murder are usually low profile, like poison. Other methods include shootings at 20%, suffocation 16%, stabbing 11%, and drowning at 5%. They commit the murder in specific places such as their home, a healthcare facility, or different locations within the same city or state. Victims tend to be a spouse, children, or the elderly. A study done has indicated that since 1975, Women serial killers are increasingly moving over to prefer strangers rather than people that they know. Juvenile serial killers are rare, but they do exist. There are three main categories: primary, maturing, and secondary killers. Motives are generally placed into four categories: visionary, mission oriented, hedonistic, and power or control. There can be an overlap, though. Visionary killers suffer from psychotic breaks with reality, sometimes believing they are another person or are compelled to murder by entities such as the devil or God, or in the Son of Sam case, the neighbor's dog. Mission-oriented killers typically justify their acts as ridding the world of certain types of people. I will not list those certain types of people, as your imagination can run with you and you'll get those answers. Hedonistic killers seek thrills and pleasures obtained along with satisfaction from killing. Subtypes to that include lust, thrill, and comfort. Lust killers, sex is primary motive. Thrill killers, inducing pain or terror is the primary motive. And for the comfort or profit, material gain and comfortable lifestyle is primary motive. Power and control. The main objective for this type of serial killer is to gain and exert power over the victim. This type of killer usually sexually assaults their victims, but differ from hedonistic killers because rape is not motivated by lust. Rather, it's simply another form of dominating the victim. Ted Bundy, Ed Kemper, David Berkowitz, Jack the Ripper, Eileen Wuornos, Richard Ramirez, Andre Chikatilo, Jeffrey Dahmer, Ed Gein, H.H. Holmes, John Wayne Gacy. Names such as these will forever be remembered for the horrific crimes that they have committed. May their victims rest in peace.